I stood on the veranda of my house, staring off into the empty patch of grass while smoking a cigarette. There was nothing, just a large patch of green. I used to see children playing soccer or throwing a frisbee around, but lately there's been less kids. No one's interested in going outside anymore, not even my own daughter Susie. Susie used to love to play outside. She would run around the open patch of grass without a care in the world. Sometimes she would even roll around in it. Other times, she would simply lie down and stare up into the clouds. But that was a long time ago. Susie doesn't want to go outside anymore. It seems that none of the kids do. We live in a relatively small estate. There's only approximately 80 houses. It's a very quiet neighborhood. Nothing interesting ever happens here, but that's why a lot of parents like it. It's a safe place for their children to live in, but it's also very boring here. There's nothing to do outside and nowhere to go. The nearest shopping center is about a 15-minute car trip away. Some of the parents have sent in complaints and suggestions to the owners of the estate, requesting some additions to the open patches of grass. Maybe add some real soccer goals or even a playground. The owners soon acknowledged these suggestions and announced plans to start construction on a playground in November of 2016. That was 2 years ago, and construction ceased to commence for a very long time. Everyone just forgot about the playground after a while. Technology consumed every household in the estate, just as it has for the rest of the world. So naturally, the owner saw no reason to build a playground if no one was around to use it. That's the reason it was so peculiar, just to see it suddenly appear out of nowhere. 3 months ago, I walked outside onto my veranda to smoke a cigarette, as I do every evening. I stared out at the patch of grass as the bright orange colors of the sunset filled the sky. And there it was. Sitting in the middle of the patch of grass was a series of fences. There was nothing inside of them, but there they were. I didn't think anything of them at first. The next day, as I was out on my veranda, I stared out into the patch of grass again. There was now wooden beams inside of the fenced-off area. Is something being constructed? I asked myself. The next day, as I smoked a cigarette and stared out onto the patch of grass as per usual, I noticed something new within the fenced-off area. There was now a seesaw and a set of swings. Is the playground finally being constructed? I pondered. Over the course of the next few days, the playground was slowly being built, bit by bit. People other than myself began to take notice. They asked the owners of the estate about it, but they claimed they had nothing to do with it. They said they weren't the ones building it, and yet the playground continued to develop over the next few weeks. And soon enough, it was complete. The finished product was a small but sturdy playground. It had a seesaw, a set of swings, a little cubby house, and a slide. All the basics of a playground. Despite the playground being finished, no one knew who actually built it. It didn't matter though, because it was enough to finally get the attention of at least a few children, and it pleased me to see them playing outside on the playground whenever I went to smoke. Everything was well for the first week. Children were finally playing outside again, and the parents seemed to be pleased about the addition of the playground. Everyone was happy. That is, until the first child went missing. It was reported that a young boy named Jeremy disappeared. He was last seen at the playground. Thankfully, it didn't cause a panic throughout the neighborhood at first, and children continued to play outside. A few days later, a second child disappeared. Another young boy named Daniel, just as Jeremy had. He was last seen at the playground. This soon caused panic throughout the estate, and authorities were now getting involved. My son would ask me if he could go outside and play, and I would respond, "No, it's too dangerous." The panic in the neighborhood escalated after 2 twin sisters went missing, a week after Daniel disappeared. The twin sisters were last seen at the playground. The police commenced a thorough investigation, trying to get to the bottom of the disappearances. However, after 2 months, there were no leads to the missing kids. I still go out and smoke a cigarette on the veranda every night. I still stare off into the patch of grass, but I don't see kids playing there anymore. But I still check every day and night, just in case. I remember one evening while I was staring at the playground smoking my cigarette, one of my neighbors walked past my house. We chatted for a bit. We mostly expressed our concerns about the recent disappearances. She told me that she was planning to move out in order to keep her own family safe. I told her that was a smart decision. My neighbor then asked me how my own daughter, Susie, was doing. "Oh, Susie's doing just fine. She's really getting along with her new brothers and sisters." "Oh, I didn't know you had more children," my neighbor said in surprise. "Yeah, 3 girls and 2 boys. I was about 8 years old when this happened, but I can still recollect every chilling detail. I moved to a new town, one that was much nicer, cleaner, and quieter than the town that I lived in prior. Not the sort of place that you would expect to have things wrong with it. There was a very big public park right in the center. It housed rows upon rows of swings, slides infested with snake-like tunnels that weaved in and around the playground, providing a maze for children to lose themselves in their games. There was even a functioning merry-go-round which always seemed to be slightly turning, inviting the children to hitch a ride on its platform of twirls. I have to emphasize on the fact that it was a quiet, peaceful town, the kind of town where kids could leave their house on their own and take the short journey to the park. I had been given strict instructions by my parents that I should come home the second it started turning dark. My life was wonderful, or so it seemed. It was a Friday. I know it was because I remember coming home with a big smile on my face, as I knew I had the luxury of non-stop playing for the next 2 whole days. I did what I always did. I took my school bag on my bed and was ordered to change my clothes. In a matter of minutes, I was ready to descend into the world of fun. Nothing could stop me. The tunnels were my favorite. It was always easy to get lost in them, which made them ideal for playing hide and seek with my only 2 friends, Billy and Tom. They were both in my class, and we, like many 8-year-olds, loved any game that filled us with pure adrenaline. We were going to play murder. I don't expect anyone to know this game. We made it up. The rules were very similar to hide and seek, except when the one seeking found you, they had to murder you. It was only pretend, obviously. It was nearing winter, as I remember being slightly cold as I wormed my way around the tunnels, furiously trying to find the perfect hiding spot. Billy was the seeker, and Tom had hidden behind the merry-go-round. I was alone. It must have been maybe 10 minutes, which for an 8-year-old felt like a year, when I decided to do what kids do when they get bored. Give up. "I give up," I shouted, my voice echoing through the tunnels. "I'm in the tunnels. I give up." I then suddenly heard shuffling from one end of the tunnel. I don't know why, but I froze still. I didn't call out again. I just waited. Something wasn't right. Billy would always say something before coming in after someone in the tunnels. He'd always congratulate them on being the last to be found, or for cheating by hiding in the endless maze of tunnels. As I stood frozen, the shuffling grew louder. I could tell that it was starting to get dark outside, as the tunnel slowly began to become darker. I began to shuffle backwards, but the shuffling ahead of me grew louder, as if someone or something way too big for the tunnel was trying to navigate around. "Come out. It's time to go home now." A very creepy voice echoed in the tunnels. It sounded like when a grown man talks to small children. This was definitely wrong. I probably would have come out if the voice was outside, but it wasn't. It was inside the tunnels. Why would an adult crawl inside? As I was shuffling further and further back, the face of an old man appeared in the darkness ahead of me. Patches of hair on his head and the definite look of someone who hadn't showered in at least a week. I couldn't see what he was wearing, but I knew that it was old, tattered clothes. He had a sharp, scraggly beard which was peppered with dirt. The second we made eye contact, he just smiled at me, revealing his filthy, unbrushed teeth, which had blotches of brown and black covering them entirely. I panicked. I turned around and began shuffling away as fast as I could on all fours, the commotion behind me growing louder and quicker. He was chasing me. I sped through the maze for what felt like an eternity. I only stopped when my legs refused to move any further. I had taken so many twists and turns that even I was completely lost. "I don't want to hurt you. I just want to talk," the voice echoed. I could tell that he was nearby. I pressed my body against the bottom of the small, narrow tunnel and listened. He continued to make soft, cooing noises, begging me to come out and present myself to him. I laid in that tunnel for hours, no exaggeration. Even after I heard him curse to himself and angrily force his way out of the maze, I continued to wait. Thoughts raced through my mind of me coming out of the tunnel, only to be met by that same disturbing smile. In the darkness, I could make out flashing blue lights coming from outside. I heard frantic voices calling 3 names repeatedly. Billy? Tom? Michael? When I heard my name, my heart slowly began to calm down. I easily shuffled out of the tunnels, guided by the wet dirt scrapings along its walls, the way the man must have gone. Outside, I was greeted by several police cars, lights flashing, and a group of adults with concerned looks on their faces. I recognized 2 of them, my parents. "Mom! Dad!" I wailed, crying as I ran to them. They lifted me off the ground and hugged me so tightly, I felt as though I was being slowly crushed. Billy and Tom were taken that evening. Their mutilated bodies were later found in a nearby ditch. They had been brutally murdered. Their skulls were caved in with a large iron bar, and their bodies had deep cuts everywhere. Large pieces of glass were found buried in their backs. What chills me to the bone is the wet dirt I saw in the tunnels wasn't entirely dirt. Some of it was Billy and Tom's blood. After slaughtering my 2 best friends and making eye contact with me in that tunnel, he just smiled. He had won the game.
There's always a reason.